£400 bike fits and 5-month wait lists? Yeah, I wasn't going to be doing that. So instead, I purchased Neill Stanbury's bike fitting course, and here's what I actually learned. So before we dive into it, I've been really curious about bike fits. I've been using AI tools like my VeloFit, and they have pretty much got me dialed in. But being the nerd I am, I wanted to understand why that was the case. Why did we raise the saddle? Why did we change the fore and aft? What does a good bike fit look like? And also some of the biomechanics behind it. For those of you who haven't heard of Neill Stanbury, if you go on YouTube and do a quick search for bike fit, you'll probably find him up there in the top results. He does a lot of videos with Cam Nichols from the Road Cycling Academy, and his content is fantastic. And plus, an extra bonus for me, I absolutely love Neill's accent. I could listen to him for hours, so I did just that. So diving into the course, I'll put an exact breakdown of what it covers, but the way Neill has structured it is fantastic. He starts from the ground up. So we do off-bike assessments, we start looking for asymmetries in our body, which I wasn't even aware of at the time, but that was such a thing and how you spot it. We then get the saddle and the fore and aft absolutely dialed in. Then we start working on the stem. Then we start playing around with like Q factor and addressing some of those imbalances. And there's a whole great bit of different saddle types and different exercises at the end. So it's a really well-structured course in my opinion. So I purchased this course ages ago, and what finally convinced me to sit down and go through it is my Cannondale. So for years on my bikes, I learned something from Neill's course that I wasn't aware of at all. One thing that really stood out to me on that course was about hypermobility. And Neill had a model for this course, and a massive shout out to Georgie on this, who was, like myself, hypermobile or hyperflexible. And so it was really good because she could position herself perfectly, like zero asymmetries on the bike. But it was really good to show like she could change her pedal stroke and things to show what bad looked like, but also what good looked like. And Neill threw some extra content in there for folks who were hypermobile. And for me, I've always been able to hold like a really aggressive aero position. And Neill made a nod to that if you are hypermobile, you kind of have to do that, because if not, you don't get very good glutes and hamstring engagement. And so for all my bikes for years, I've pretty much had 130mm stem at the front, and the saddle's been like a skyscraper. And then on my Cannondale, it feels like a really odd endurance fit. So the saddle's kind of like medium height. I've got a 120mm stem on it, and I've just always felt off. I've never quite bonded with a bike. I've never felt like I fit very well on it. It's kind of odd. It feels like it's both too high, but too far, but too cramped and too low. It's a very odd sensation. So just on the bit on the Cannondale, you can kind of see that the saddle and the stem height, it looks like an endurance fit. It feels like that should be shorter or that should be higher. The saddle height and the fore and aft are absolutely dialed in. So I'm just going to take out a spacer, and that should sort all the issues out. And since going through this course, I think I've now spotted where the issue is, and now learning from Neill that because of my hypermobility and my excess flexibility, that perhaps what I should do is actually drop that stem even more. That may now finally sort out the issue. I'm just going through editing the video, and I mentioned about dropping the stem. I just wanted to give a quick update on if it worked or it didn't. And I'm just going to say a massive, massive, massive shout out to Neill here, because dropping that stem by 1 centimeter has been like an absolute game changer. Got proper glute engagement now. The hamstrings are firing away. I've been trialing it out now. I've done about 10 hours indoors and just different sort of power zones and things. It is fantastic. That one move there has been totally worth it. It's helped out so much. And one thing I take away from this course, and this is probably the biggest revelation for me, is how important feeling is. And so I thought it was like a mechanical formula or something that you could put in, but based on the person's height, shoulder width, etc., that this would be like the perfect bike fit. But as Neill points out in his course, that actually on paper, this can look like the best fit ever, but you can be totally miserable and uncomfortable if it's not right. So a bit like me with a Cannondale stem, on paper, according to the AI bike fitting tools, it's dialed in, but to me, it feels really wrong. So that was a really interesting takeaway for me, at least. One thing that was really good for me, and I think really added a ton of value, was the off-bike exercises and stretches at the end. They are definitely going to be something I'm going to be incorporating into my workouts now. And some of the stretches were genius, especially for those hamstrings. Really, really clever stuff. overall, I really like the way this is structured. But if we move over to some of the negatives now, they are small and they are maybe a little bit of a nitpick, but for me, I felt that they're worth addressing. So one thing, again, being weird, being hypermobile, was there wasn't anything I found in the course or the provided PDFs that covered cleat angle. So there are a couple of things for like Q factor and for people whose feet kind of point outwards, but I'm one of the weirdos. I've got one foot that wants to point inwards, and there wasn't really anything on there about like adjusting. It was very much get it centered, but after that, it's like, why would we adjust it? But that's a small thing to add. And the only other little bit for me was about stem length. It just felt like that part was just a little bit not as defined as the other sections. It just didn't quite feel as dialed in and robust as like the saddle, for example, where that was really important and you had a lot of steps to get it dialed in. It just felt like it wasn't quite as detailed, perhaps. But apart from that, I think it's a solid course. It was really fascinating to me. I learned a ton from it as well. And if we go over and look at the RCA website right now, it's $147. And that works out to roughly $1 every minute. And so it comes down to the really important question right now. Who is this course for? So if you're someone like me who's really interested in bike fitting, I'd probably say it's worth it. If you have a really specific pain and issue and you want to get like dialed in on that bike, I'd probably say it's worth it. If you're looking for how to get like a really aggressive fit or how to get an endurance fit, I'd probably say this isn't for you. It's not really going to cover that. I'd say in a nutshell, this course is like bike fitting 101, setting that foundation up, spotting all the issues you might have, the imbalances, the asymmetries in your body. Is one leg longer than the other? Is your hip level, for example? How we address those? It just wouldn't really help, for example, if you were looking to buy a new bike and you weren't sure what size to buy or what size stem you should go for. Because Neill does make a nod to that as well. And I've got the same problem with my Cannondale where it's fully integrated with the cable. You can't just easily go ahead and say, hey, let me try 130mm stem on there, because you've got to cut hoses, rewire them, recalibrate. It's like a 2-hour job to do that. So I'm not sure if this is a subtle nod from Cam and Neill to say the good old rim brake days, but hey, it's worth knowing and it is something to consider. And as I mentioned at the start, calling a few bike fitters around me, average price about £300 to £400. They've all got like a 3-month plus wait list. I think one person I spoke to, I think they were saying like 7 months to get booked in for a bike fit. And so with this, I feel like the combination of both the AI tools and now understanding what Neill's talked about, I feel like I can pretty much dial myself in now on pretty much any bike. So that pretty much wraps up this video. If you've got any other bike fitting courses or any other information you reckon I should check out, please let me know below. I'd be super interested in your thoughts and feedback on that. But overall, it's a really interesting course, and I feel like the content Neill and Cam put out is super invaluable. So for me, it felt good to support them. So with that, we're going to wrap this up, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.